When I was starting out, I simply did not have my own drum room or like a recording studio that I could use to track drums and loud instruments in whenever I wanted, and so I had to rely on different solutions. Like in my case, I've done a lot of mobile tracking, like just taking a mobile rig and bring it to rehearsal spots and track there, or of course using a lot of MIDI drums. And those solutions actually worked out so well that I've managed to go full-time in my studio without ever having my own drum studio, and I still don't have my own drum studio to this day. However though, if you're gonna go down a similar path as me and using a lot of MIDI drums in your productions as well, there's a couple crucial things that you have to look out for, otherwise your MIDI drums are just gonna sound, fake and robotic, or the process is just gonna be very frustrating and not repeatable. Alright, so let's talk about 3 common mistakes that people are making and that holding your MIDI drums back from sounding professional. So the first mistake is just ignoring the source. Now, when it comes to real drums, the source is much more obvious, right? You have like an actual real drum kit in front of you, and it needs new drum heads, and you need to tune them correctly, and think about what mic you're gonna use and where you're gonna put it, and all that stuff. And then, of course, the drummer still has to perform well, right? So capturing source tones when it comes to live drums is much more like a big project, I guess. But when it comes to MIDI drums, you obviously don't have to tune or mic drums yourself, and so therefore a lot of people just overlook the importance of still focusing on getting high quality source sounds. So for MIDI, a big part of just creating good quality source tones all comes down to humanizing the MIDI itself, as well as of course your sample selection, which we'll jump into later as well. But as you can see, I've just pulled up a MIDI file from a recent mix that I've worked on, and all the MIDI is just hard quantized and full velocity here. And yeah, let's see what it sounds like. It's completely robotic, of course. So, especially notice the China symbol here. It just sounds like it's the exact same little wave file that is being repeated over and over again almost. Doesn't have any human feel to it at all. Same here with the crash here. There's no human feel, and especially when you go to the fills, like this snare fill here. There's absolutely no human feel. So let's fix that. And for cymbals, that process is actually quite simple. I just used the change velocity function that Pro Tools has here. I'm pretty sure most DAWs will have a similar, if not the same function here. I just go pretty high, and then I use this randomize function here, and I randomize it by 9 or 10 or something. So what that will do, as soon as I select some Chinas here, for example, let's just get all of them, and I hit randomize here, then it's just, I hope you can see that too, like this is just full velocities, and now I just randomized them by 9. So I guess some of them will now be 126 minus 9 and everything in between there. I keep that first hit at full velocity because I want the song to kind of start with a big double crash there, and it's totally cool to keep that full velocity. But notice the difference here. I'll just play a section here with the full velocity Chinas here, and then I'll just play it again with the randomized. Here we go. Okay, let's hear that again, but now randomized. Notice the China. So just making sure that not all these hits are like completely perfect, full, hard hits, just gave it immediately a much more human feel. Let's do the same thing for that crash in this section here. So I'll just select all of them except for the first one again, and just hit randomize. Maybe we can do a little bit less aggressive randomization here, because otherwise I feel like we're losing some power. So let's do 6. Again, that just sounds much more human compared to just having it all blasting full here. So cymbals are quite easy, and I'm using Superior Drummer to do that. And the reason for using Superior is because they have recorded so many different like velocity layers for all of these different instruments here, that actually allows you to create very, very human feeling drums. Like some drum samples or drum libraries will only record like hard hits and then medium hits and maybe soft hits. So that gives you 3, I guess, loudness options. But Superior has done a great job at recording as many like velocity layers so that it really allows you to just create massive dynamics in fills like that. So as you can see, that humanizing process is quite simple when it comes to cymbals, but for kick and snare there's usually a little bit more like manual labor involved, I guess. For like most of the like regular drum beats, I'm perfectly cool to keep the kicks and the snares at full velocity most of the time, except when you have ghost snares or like snare fills like over here, which doesn't sound anything human right now. And so I'll just jump in by hand and just select all of these snares and just create something like a left right kind of thing. So you don't even have to do big moves here in terms of the difference in velocity, but just that already just sounds way more human than just keeping it all super like hard hits. So that's like a snare fill. We also have some like tom fills here. Let me see what this sounds like right now. Okay, yeah, so as you can see, it's just like two of these floor toms, I guess, and they're both hitting at the exact same time as well as the kick, and no matter how good of a drummer you are, that's just never gonna happen, right? So you have to create some sort of human feeling, and I just literally dive in by hand and move some of these notes a little bit off grid, and then just play around with the velocity just a little bit, maybe like that. Let's see what that sounds like. Again, much more human than just keeping it hard quantized and full velocity, right? And so this is what the process looks like for me. Whenever I receive a MIDI file, I just request my clients to send me, full velocity and just hard quantized, and I jump in and I go in with these techniques here to randomize these cymbals and, play with the timing of all of these fills. And when you've gone through the entire song like that and humanized all the cymbals and the fills and everything, and the MIDI is in a good spot, then the next step is, of course, to select all these samples and the sounds that you want to be using in the final mix. And that brings us to the second most common mistake, which is that people tend to stay within these libraries way too much. And so what ends up happening is that sometimes I'll have a local band release a song and they actually recognize the snare as being one from one of these libraries, which is of course a dead giveaway that it's just MIDI drums and they're using the same sample libraries that everybody else is using. So I'll show you how I overcome that by basically treating Superior Drummer as like my live drum kit, in a sense, that I'm then augmenting with samples like I would when I'm mixing a real drum kit and all that good stuff. So for cymbals and room sounds, etc., I'm perfectly cool to use these sounds that come straight out of Superior Drummer. I'm absolutely fine with that. But for kick and snare, again, I just want to create a little bit more unique sounds. And so this is my process for that. First, I'm just copying this humanized MIDI down to this new track here, which I call Live Snare. And so all the MIDI is on here. There's another instance of Superior Drummer on this track as well, with my selected snare that I've used in the final mix of this song. And so I'll open this MIDI and I'll get rid of everything that is not a snare. So everything should be gone now, I think. And now we have just a snare. Alrighty, so this is what that sounds like. And so this is just my live snare, and we can even go a little bit more aggressive in terms of the humanization, I guess, for that. So let's see this little fill here. Maybe we can do a little bigger moves there, and just making sure that this sounds like the most, like the closest, I guess, to a live drum kit as we can possibly get it. Even here, like that second hit can be a little lower, maybe. Alright, so now we have a live snare, and this is basically what I'm going to treat as my live snare quite literally in the final mix as well, which I'll then augment with a snare sample. In this case, just a huge one-shot over-the-top deathcore snare, as well as a room sound only snare. So in this case, I'm using 2 samples. So let me show you what these snares sound like. So we have our live snare. I'll just copy the processing that I've used in the actual mix over to the, I guess, the source track over here. So that's what this sounds like with our sample snare, and then our room snare as well. And so that's completely unique sounding, because like this blend will change with every single mix, right? I'll use different samples in every single mix, but I always have some sort of like a live snare track engaged here, so that in fills like this, which obviously that one-shot snare is not gonna sound the most realistic. Right, and so I just gain it down a little bit during fills like that, and I will rely a little bit heavier on the live snare there, and I'm just automating these different samples up and down, depending on the part of the song and what it needs. Now, when it comes to the kick drum in this particular song, I have actually fully replaced it with third-party samples, so I'm not using any of the superior kicks in this one for the same reason, right? I'm just looking for more of like a unique sound. So again, I'm just blending some samples. I even have a kick room sound only sample in there, and this is what that sounds like on its own. And then if we add the snare to it, and if you put that into the mix, you get these larger than live drum sounds here. This is what that fill sounds like with automating that one shot down. So let's see here. Let's go back a little bit. So as you can hear, it's not super robotic simply because I've lowered this crazy one-shot sample. If I keep it at the same volume, it's actually kind of ugly here. A little bit more robotic, I guess. And so yeah, you can just play around with the balance between the different samples throughout the song, like I said earlier here. All right, and that brings us to the third and final common mixing mistake when it comes to MIDI drums, and that is not committing to all these selected sounds that we have now by actually printing them down to audio instead of keeping them as MIDI. To me, like selecting samples and blending them like I just showed you falls actually a little bit more under the like production umbrella and not so much the mixing umbrella. And so if you're not clear on when all of that production stuff ends so that you can actually get down to mixing, well then of course you're gonna stay stuck, right? It's gonna take a lot longer, and you basically have no idea when your mix is actually going to be finished, because are you still producing, are you still mixing? Nobody knows, right? So that is one of the biggest reasons why I recommend you print all of this stuff down to audio, which you can see here. The only thing I haven't printed yet is our live snare, which I have done in the other song in this EP. So here's the samples, the toms I should say, and the cymbals, all of that good stuff. And the other benefit of doing that is that you can use the exact same mixing processing that you would use when you're just mixing like a live drum kit, right? And just use the same routing and the same plugins, the same kind of, drum bus compressor and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to keep that all in one plugin, then it's going to be insanely hard to replicate the exact same result, right? And as you all understand, consistency in the process equals consistency in the result, and that is exactly why I mix live drums and MIDI drums in the exact same way, again using the same routing, the same plugins, all of that stuff. All right, I hope that sheds some light on what to look out for when you're using MIDI drums, and how you can make this process easier for yourself, and how you can be more creative when blending sounds and all that good stuff for in your own productions, of course. If you enjoyed this genre of music, this metalcore, deathcore stuff, then I also have this video up where I'm mixing vocals in the same style from start to finish, so you can check that out right now.